Welcome to Monday Morning Methane. I'm very, very excited to have Stefanie Shoup joining me today, who is the Deputy Director of Regulatory Affairs, Air Pollution Control Division, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, which I'm going to say CDPHE, but that's a mouthful. Welcome, Steph.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, really excited for our chat today. CDPHE has a greenhouse gas intensity rule, which we've heard a lot about from conferences, from our customers. It's actually one of the first regulations that's ever been written anywhere in the world, as far as I know, that directly addresses what we often talk about in Monday Morning Methane as the discrepancy between top-down estimates and bottom-up estimates, and to actually incorporate a reconciliation process into a regulation. So I was wondering if we could get started, if you could explain a little bit about the regulation and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So back in 2021, or in rather 2019 and 2020, our legislature gave us the authority to regulate greenhouse gases for the very first time. So prior to that, we were not able to directly regulate greenhouse gases. And so what we did with that was we were able to move forward with a greenhouse gas specific oil and gas rule. And what has been nice in Colorado is we've done so much historic regulation that did affect greenhouse gases. A lot of the engine requirements that we've done, a lot of the VOC reduction requirements or volatile organic compound requirements also reduce methane emissions. So we had a really strong starting point there. And so what we wanted to do was to think a little bit differently. And it was a really exciting and cool opportunity because all of our rules historically, because they were so focused on volatile organic compounds and oxides of nitrogen, all of those were a lot more focused on like equipment or emission point type of rules. So like reducing emissions from storage tanks or having better standards for engines. And with greenhouse gases, it's a different type of pollutant. It's a global pollutant. It doesn't really matter where it's coming out. We just wanted to reduce it. And so we were able to take maybe a little step back. And so when we did that, we looked at the suite of rules and regulations that we had on oil and gas already. And we said, how do we complement all of those rules that are already in place to create a stronger greenhouse gas program? And our idea was to create an intensity program. So that was really around understanding what the ratio was of emissions to production from upstream oil and gas operations, and really focusing in on how do we get overall improvement on that ratio without necessarily or relying on, in a lot of cases, all of these underlying rules and regulations. So it was a way to kind of think creatively. But one of the questions that comes up with things like intensity, especially once you're really thinking about kind of holistic emissions, is what are we missing? And that's a question that we've been asking ourselves for decades, right? It's like, what are we missing? And so every time that you're working through that problem, you're looking for, are my engineering calculations wrong? Is there data that I'm missing? Are they inaccurate? Is an emission factor wrong? You're looking for the clues that tell you that things are not quite right. And what was happening at the same time as us developing this intensity program was the explosion of methane monitoring. And so this is a brand new tool to really say, are we getting it right? Are we understanding what actual emissions are? And so, of course, we wanted to take advantage of that and like bring that in. And so, what we did in thinking about this intensity program is how do we incorporate this new tool that is out there and being actively developed right now that is really cutting edge, but that will help us better understand what actual emissions are? How do we incorporate it? And in 2021, I was told pretty solidly by Dan Zimmerly, it's not ready. um,
I think
and
he still
so,
says that.
and he still says that. He's like, it's not ready. And I was like, okay, well, I'll give you 2 years, right? So it was like, okay, then we'll come back in 2023 and we'll try to figure out what we want to do. And so we came back in 2023 and the words were still kind of, it's not really ready, but how can we move it forward in a way that's flexible enough to grow with it? And so that's where the challenge kind of switched to, is we developed intensity, established that in 2021. And then in 2023, it was how do we build in this measurement component so that we can make improvements on actual emission reporting? And all of this is predicated on the idea that we will never know what actual emissions are. We cannot possibly measure everything all the time, right? All of this is about incremental improvements on old methodologies that we've used, some of which are still entirely valid and the best way to estimate emissions, and others which can be improved upon through better monitoring, either parametric or methane measurement. So there's a lot of opportunity there to make improvements on that. And if we stay focused on the goal of improving the inventory so we can better understand actual emissions, then it opens up a whole world of things that can be done to make that better. And that's what we really tried to focus on, and to build a rule around what can be done in the short term, and then allow enough flexibility to build in the long term what as it iteratively gets better and better and better.
Mhm. Well, one of the things that we've seen, and coming from Alberta, where we've had all kinds of methane policy for quite a long time now, is that when you incorporate flexibility, a little bit of risk tolerance into policy, then you can actually foster quite a bit of innovation. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen happening, or at least in the conversations that we've had with some of our customers around this rule. One of the interesting parts about the regulation, and one of the things that everybody is talking about, is this thing called a default factor.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, could you explain a little bit what a default factor is, and why it's relevant, and then how you developed the default factor?
Yeah, absolutely. So when developing any kind of rule or requirement, one of the things that you really have to prove out is what's the benefit and what's the cost. And we can't move anything forward where we haven't fully evaluated cost and benefit. And what we were finding is that, a lot of the opportunities to do methane measurement in particular were still pretty costly, still not necessarily available to any and every operator. So we still needed a way to incorporate methane measurement into everyone's measurement or everyone's inventory without necessarily charging every single operator with doing their own measurements, because that cost to the benefit would have been kind of outweighed. And so what we wanted to do was create an alternative that said, we will do some of the science and the studies and come up with a default that just is a high level basin wide comparison of measured methane to reported methane. And we will do our best to kind of narrow down how to compare apples to apples there as best we can. And then we'll come up with a default factor that will say, it's 1.2, or it's 2 times, or it's whatever. Um, and we will publish that, and then operators that don't want to do their own measurement programs can use that default. Anyone who
So just
wants,
to clarify, let's say it's two.
yeah,
That means that you've done top-down measurements around Colorado,
yep,
and you've taken what operators have reported, and
yep.
what you've measured is 2 times higher than what was
What
reported.
we've measured is 2 times higher. Exactly. Yep,
Okay, cool.
yep.
And so I think you're gonna get into this, but how
Yes,
how how did you go about developing the default factor for
yes.
that was published?
Yeah. So fortunately, we've been doing monitoring pretty intensively since 2021 and trying to kind of build upon this. And our hopes and dreams and goals, and this is how I always start out with these things, is we will do monitoring in 2024 in 2023 that will inform 2024 as default factor for 2025. And that's like always the goal. And we didn't quite get there. And instead, for the 2025 year, what we published in December of 2024 is based on a study that was done in 2021. And so ideally, we will bring that closer and closer over time. But right now, the best available data and the only completed study that really kind of let us use it was from 2021. And that study was really kind of looking at, again, kind of that top down, bottom up, but it was a bigger picture. So it was kind of bigger methane measurements from much higher. It was across regions, so it was a lot harder to distinguish between midstream emissions and upstream emissions. So there were a lot more assumptions that went into it. But ultimately, using a combination of that methane measurement and some modeling exercises to kind of understand what components met with what, and using, the kind of developing maze model and so on, they were able to come up with, working with CSU, they were able to come up with an emission factor from that 2021 study that we were able to use that operators can apply to their 2025 inventories, which will be due next year. Our goal is to have a much more refined study that really focuses on how do we eliminate the question of what's midstream and what's upstream?
Mhm.
How do we eliminate the question of what's other source types versus oil and gas specifically? How do we get down into the weeds of you know, what are we seeing that is from these really small facilities and these big facilities, and how are they different? Like, how do we get down into the level of granularity that we actually need? Because when you have larger planes flying higher in the air, you're not going to see the really small emission sources. So we wanted to get to how do we get more refined data, more localized, so that we can do a much tighter analysis. And so that's what we've been working with CSU on the last couple of years, and are hoping to use that for 2026, and then also kind of build upon that and let that grow as it gets better and better for future years.
Cool. So, I mean, let's say the factor is just throwing a number at, let's say it's 50x. It'll never be 50x.
I hope not.
But you kind of alluded to this, but if you're an operator in Colorado, you don't just have to take that and apply it to your inventory
Yep.
for what you report. You have another option. So, do you want
Yep.
to just mention briefly what that is?
Yeah. So the other option for those operators that want to accept the mission, it's not an easy mission. I will say that. Um, for those other operators that want to accept the challenge, they can develop their own methane measurement program, and they can essentially work with us before instituting that measurement program to say, okay, this is what we want to do. And we'll work through some of the details and talk about what kind of records they need to keep, and what information we need. They'll go and do it for that year. And then after the fact, they'll come back and they'll say, this is what we did. This is what we learned. And this is what we think we need to do better. But the benefit that they get from that is they don't have to apply the default factor. And we are going to assume that their program did what it was supposed to do, even if there were flaws. Because this is not about perfection. This is about making iterative improvements on an inventory. And so for that year, if they're willing to kind of take on this big gargantuan task of developing and implementing a methane measurement program for the year, we're going to give them the credit of, we're going to assume that your inventory is measurement informed, and we're going to use what you've learned from that to help everyone make better choices or make tweaks or to do whatever in the future, and learn from those programs.
And many of the operators are probably participating in voluntary programs like OGMP 2.0 that have very similar kind of requirements. So it's a gargantuan task, but for some operators, they're already doing it, and there's an
Exactly.
opportunity to streamline regulatory reporting
Yeah.
with their
Yeah.
voluntary commitment. So
Yeah.
I want to zoom out a little bit, just kind of in the last couple of minutes here. Obviously, this is very innovative policy. It's experimental.
Yeah.
Really excited to see how it plays out, and I believe it will have a really positive impact. Do you have conversations with colleagues at the EPA, at Alberta Energy Regulator, at Environment Canada, probably all over the world? What direction do you see other regulators going, especially as it pertains to leveraging more measurement data?
Yeah. I would say this is an incredibly so many people are interested in moving this direction. So many of regulators really want to push this. And I think where what we're doing to kind of do proof of concept, I think is helping to inform what will work on a broader scale, whether that's nationally or for another country. I think it's also an opportunity to talk with, and we've had countries come to Colorado to talk to us about this. And I'm not talking like just anybody, but like I've had conversations with Brazil. I've had conversations with India, with Kazakhstan, um, with Turkmenistan. Iraq came, sent
Nice.
a delegate to Colorado. So these are like big producers in the world that have a tremendous opportunity to reduce their methane emissions. And so even if we get like a portion of what we've done in the US and in Colorado that can influence how they're developing out their policies, we could see a tremendous amount of benefit. And so I'm really, really excited about the fact that this could actually help inform a bigger global picture of how do we do this and how do we do it in a way that actually makes sense and is enforceable and is meaningful and is measurable for the world. And so that's just, it's a very cool place to be in. So yeah.
That's amazing. I didn't realize the extent to which you were engaging with regulators in all over the world, and I agree the impact could be massive. One thing we find is that most people don't want to be first, but they don't want to be last, and so you're doing a service by being first to all the kind of other regulators and organizations who are kind of interested in developing different types of more measurement-based policy as they observe your experiment. So
Yes.
very last question. Obviously, you're working on something else at the moment, or continuing to work on kind of the next iteration of the factor, and working towards more reporting. What do the next couple of years look like for you and for CDPHE?
Yeah. Well, as you might imagine, any time that there's a major political shift, things get a little wonky. And so we'll be working really on fully implementing this program, doing some proof of concept of how this is kind of actually working. And we're going to have some challenges in terms of how much monitoring we wanted to pay for or have done, because the money is just not going to be there in the same kind of way. And so it is still a tremendous opportunity for us to think creatively, to look for how can we partner. We built so many great relationships with academics that are working on this, research organizations with other countries that are still doing work like this, that I have imminent confidence that we will figure out how to keep this moving forward, even in the midst of a time where we're not going to be able to do it quite as aggressively as we wanted to. But that's part of the reality of government, right? Is that you're going to have times where you're flush with money and times where you're not. And we still need the programs to move forward and do good. And so we will figure out how we're going to do that.
Steph, I've really enjoyed this conversation and have enjoyed watching the work that you've done, and will continue to be watching my popcorn on the sidelines as the data rolls in. It's really
Just
exciting.
don't throw the popcorn at us.
Oh, no. Yeah,
Share the popcorn with us afterward when we're exhausted. That's all I ask.
I can promise some shared popcorn next time we meet. Thanks so much, Steph.
Yes, thanks.